Okay, so hey everybody. I am going to try to juggle both Zoom and Discord. I apologize if I'm a little bit slow on catching things in Discord. Panelists, feel free to let me know, hey, there's a question in Discord that we need to answer. But welcome. This panel is on our favorite writing tools. And first, let's go around to the panel and start by introducing ourselves. So let's start with Tone.
Hi there, I'm Tone Milazzo. Hopefully it's not too subtle. I'm the author of The Faith Machine, an espionage novel. It's the elevator pitch for that is the X-Men in the X-Files, so sort of a plainclothes superheroes as spy thing. I have a previous novel which I forgot to bring out to show, Picking Up the Ghost, which was my urban fantasy book.
About John.
I'm John Stith. I've had 8 science fiction novels out from Ace and Tor and Science Fiction Book Club. My next work due out is Tiny Time Machine in January from Amazing Stories. It's a YA novella packaged as a standalone edition.
And then we've got Jim Van Pelt.
Hi, I'm Jim Van Pelt. Let me see, my latest is up here. This is the best of James Van Pelt, which I was really looking forward to showing off in the vendor's room at MileHi and World Fantasy, and now we're doing it virtually. I mostly write short fiction. I recently retired from teaching English full-time so I could write full-time.
And then we've also got Betsy Dornbush.
I'm Betsy Dornbush. Good morning from snowy Colorado. I'm a fantasy novelist and short story writer. I've written 5 books, and I don't know how many short stories I've lost count. Maybe a couple dozen, something like that. So good morning.
Morning. And I'm Emily Ma. People may also know me as E.M. Tippett. I actually have more books published under that name. I started as a small press author and always wanted to do science fiction. You know, I went to Clarion West and all of that, but I, for the heck of it, self-published a couple of romance novels, and that kind of took over my life for a while. I did pretty decently, made a living that way. And these days I'm just trying to get back to my science fiction and fantasy roots. I've got 15 novels out, and I probably about half a dozen pro short story sales. I figured the first question that we should ask going around the panel is, I noticed in the description of the panel, it doesn't really distinguish between tangible and intangible tools. Because I think writers have a mix of both. So I think we should spend part of the time talking about tangible and part of the time talking about intangible writing tools. And so if we could just go around and everybody say which they would spend more time on, talking about your tangible tools, like your physical laptop, or I would put software and things like that as tangibles. I understand that's blurring the line. Intangibles, I would put techniques and routines and things like that. So if we could just go around and feel free to just call out and what would you focus more of your time on, tangible or intangible? And people listening, feel free to type into Discord. What do you want to hear more about, the tangible or the intangible? So I can do either. What's that?
I think intangible for
Intangible?
Me. Yeah.
Probably intangible for me too. The tangible is a very short list. 11-inch MacBook Air, which I can carry everywhere, and a good set of noise canceling headphones.
Okay, and we've got a commenter who is interested in the tangible. Okay.
On my tangible list, I've got things like X-Mind, but in the intangible list, I'm just thinking of my reading list more than anything. I'll be interested to see what is on everyone else's intangible list.
Okay, and then so got another panel, somebody who wants intangible. Going off of what Jim said, let's start with the tangible, because I am guessing, and you guys may prove me wrong, that our tangible lists are actually going to be pretty darn short. I would guess that to a certain extent, one of our intangibles is getting our tangible list down nice and small. But what are your, let's just go down the panel. What are your tangible tools that you use for writing, the things that you can't live without or just really struggle to get your writing done without? Let's start with Tone.
Well, I mean, I need Google Keep. That's where when I'm doing something else and I have an idea, I can just pull out my phone and store it right there. So that's all the non sequiturs and stuff. That would be the first tangible tool I use. And then after that, I would say probably this guy right here. is the Neo 2. This is my first draft writing machine. So it is, I can go into it more later, but it's basically just a keyboard with a little screen and some memory. And I can write my first draft on it without any distractions from the internet. I can go out in the backyard and pound it out there. And then I transfer things over into Scrivener from there. And then Word is just like the last resort for me.
John, how about you?
I would echo Google Keep. It's handy. I used to have a pen paper with me all the time, and that's no longer true, which is, it still feels weird. But I really like Xmind as a tool, and I can bring up, I can do a screen sharing thing for a couple minutes later if there's interest. It's basically an outliner on steroids with a lot of cool advantages. And there are many mind mapping programs. That's just one I happen to use.
So we have a question. Can you describe a little bit more what Xmine is?
Yeah, it's a super outliner, basically. It's a visual outliner where you can start, say, with a central topic. And then as a thought about characters occurs to you, you can spin out a bubble about that, and you can just go whatever direction the ideas are coming to you. And it's a great tool for organizing all that.
Is it software?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like OneNote, although I think Microsoft is taken OneNote a big step back in functionality now. So those are my main two. Final Draft is indispensable for scripts.
How about you, Jim?
Well, the laptop, which I just talked about, and the noise canceling headphones are helpful. On the software side, I use Word. I started out as a Word Perfect guy, and I just hated having to switch over to Word, but that's what our school district did, and now that's what I'm used to. A tangible that I use a lot is Ken Rand's 10% solution. It's not software, it's the ideas from his book applied to editing. But since I write almost exclusively short stories, some of the organizing tools that the others of you have talked about don't really fall into my wheelhouse. I don't need to use Scrivener to do outlines or put all pieces in place in a short story. I haven't had that at all. So my needs are pretty simple, and I always keep a notebook around in case I want to scribble down an idea. And I think, and Google search, which I seem to be using all the time. That may be the advantage of being on my laptop and not on something like a Neo, but I have the disadvantage of I can also check Facebook and my email and see what XKCD cartoon is put up and spend time that way too, just because I'm connected to the internet.
And I see we do have a couple questions. We're gonna let Jim and Betsy finish, and then we'll make sure to answer everybody's questions. And yeah, Tone here has already responded in the chat.
That's it for me on tangibles.
How about you, Betsy?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm like still kind of a Luddite or something. I because I was an artist, I really feel the need to write things. So I use Word to draft all the way through submission. But I go to pen and paper a lot. So I have these, and a lot of times I don't even look back at it. It just sort of helps me sort my thoughts sometimes when I'm in the middle of, the throes of writing a scene or something. So I have a Moleskine for every book, and I'm sure it wouldn't make much sense to anybody else, but it is basically my story Bible, but it's not terribly organized. I try every book I think I'm going to really make it pretty and organized, and it never ends up that way. And then, I have some books I refer to, but maybe that's more, we were talking about reading, so maybe that's more intangible. And then honestly, probably my Filofax too. Again, like I kind of went, especially with my schedule dropping down this year, I kind of went back to pen and paper, in keeping my schedule. And if I write down on my Filofax, that's something that seems to get done that day. So I have it right in front of me all the time. So that's something, a weird little quirk thing that I sort of have to do. You know, I write down a couple of things I want to get done each day, and writing is almost always on it. So yeah, that's pretty much for tangible what I use.
Yeah, my tangible list I think is pretty short too.
Oh, and
I-
tea.
What's that?
And tea.
And tea,
Can't
yeah,
forget tea,
like chocolate, yeah,
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, for a while there, we were living in London. We were living off of my husband's student stipend, so I've found a lot of really cheap workarounds. I haven't owned a license for Word for probably 15 years at this point, and so I would use OpenOffice or Google Docs, or I did finally get Scrivener, and I do find Scrivener very useful. And I figured out that if I could get used to writing on a specific machine, then I could write in any place. So I make my routine about the machine. And so for a long time, I was writing on really cheap, like little netbook, Chromebook, Asus things. And nowadays I have a computer. Kind of along the lines of Tone, I'm going to get a FreeWrite Traveler when those come out, and it's a similar concept. It's only internet connected to back up your stuff. Yeah, and so people are gonna. So why don't we, Tone, if you're okay with this, let's talk a little bit about these kind of stripped down machines that quite a few writers actually do use. So you've got yours. You want to hold yours up again?
Yeah, sure.
And then yeah, there's the Alpha Smart, which yes, it was discontinued, but a lot of writers still use them and get them for like $20 to $40 on eBay.
Mhm.
And a lot of people swear by them. They're more convenient than a typewriter. And
Yeah. Quieter too.
Yeah. Does anybody though from the audience, I mean, we've had a few questions about it. Does anybody want to sort of type in any questions?
Well, there are more expensive versions of it. You can get
Yeah.
ones that actually look like little typewriters
Yeah.
that have Wi-Fi, and like you said, they back up things to Google Doc and everything. But that's $400 now.
Yeah, that's what the free rights and such are. And so that's the one that I'm getting. Machines don't tend to like me, they tend to die. And I have actually found that if I put more money in, they tend to last longer, but I could burn through netbooks like every 6 months. They just,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm the other way around. I have laptops going back 12 years hanging
Right.
around this house that I still use sometimes. This one, I will say, there is a little difficulty with. You have to be a little computer savvy to actually get your information off of this.
Mhm.
So you have to get the software that is the interface. It plugs in on USB, but you need the appropriate software to get it off properly. And then it's as easy as pulling a file off there. If you don't have that, and if you just plug this into a Windows and probably a Mac machine, okay, it acts like a typewriter. And it has the option of actually typing out your document into something. But you have to like open Word, put the cursor on there, and start that process and walk away without any screensavers, right? Because it is actually acting as if somebody's typing on there. And
that kind of defeats the purpose of, I mean, then you're still online on your computer.
Well, at that point,
Yeah.
this is a dumping it to the computer.
Oh,
Eventually,
gotcha.
it's got to get off the Neo somehow, right? You can't
Right.
publish off of this thing.
Gotcha.
But it can be very persnickety about focus. If you lose focus off Word and you move to something else, then it starts typing off into it doesn't know that. It just starts typing off into oblivion, and then you lose all that.
Right.
So if you're then on a Mac, you need the specific software for that. There's workarounds. I was running Linux exclusively. There's workarounds on that you can use with Wine and stuff like that. So I know for a lot of people that's too much. I'm a computer guy, so it's not a big deal for me. But for me, it was worth it to save $160, $360.
How many of you, besides Betsy, also write longhand sometimes?
I did that with the first book, and that's why I got the Neo 2, because transcribing is painful to me. I'm a terrible typist.
I have a good friend.
And I hate reading my own handwriting.
I have a good friend who writes novels and typically does the first draft longhand so that the transcribing is when he does his first edit. So the only reason I throw that out there is it is a thing. There are still authors that do that.
I had considered scanning it in and using that hand reading software.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be very lucky with it.
Is that Daniel who's doing the longhand?
No, Trent Zelazny.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he
I
always
remember
has.
Daniel
his
saying
backup.
something about writing his first books longhand and then sometimes finishing the book and then putting the whole book away and starting all over again with the book in his head, longhand both times.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's some people are very dedicated to the craft in that respect.
Does he
we
write
have-
it with a fountain pen?
You are actually good.
By
I mean,
can't
that may
by
sound like
by
a joke.
gaslight?
That may sound like a joke, but if you actually are going to write for long periods of time, do look into better pens. Ballpoints are actually very hard on your arm.
Oh yeah.
Somebody also asked, do any of us use ergonomic tools that make writing easier or more productive? Do any of you have any ergonomic tools?
I tried dabbling with Dragon, the voice recognition thing.
Yeah.
There is a curve for both the program and the user on that, and I never had the willpower to go through that and actually train the computer and train myself to use it. But that's an alternative.
Yeah, Dragon is text to speech.
Yeah,
How about
you
the
just-
rest of you?
No,
mean-
the closest I come to that is just moving my mouse to my left hand sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Betsy, as an artist, how much? I mean, you've got to really think about your hands and your.
Yeah, I actually have a long time shoulder injury, so I pretty much just damage it every time I sit down to write. So honestly, like yoga is the only thing that saves me. And I would say my ergonomics are not good, but I have an old desk that I adore, that I just love, and I won't give it up. And so yeah, it's it's probably not sustainable, but I've been doing it for 20 years, so I'll probably just keep doing it.
It's a good point.
I
That
do
we sort of.
recommend like exercise and yoga and stretching and getting up a lot. I live with my family, so I get up a lot, which I think helps too. Taking breaks.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It is. Somebody's asking if you can turn up your mic a little bit, and
Maybe if I just lean.
the rest of
forward.
us can also like crank. Let's see if I can crank mine down a little bit so that everybody can turn up the volume of the whole panel a little bit.
I moved it closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is louder.
Okay.
It is important to be in tune with your body. Pain is not good. If something hurts, stop doing it. Do you guys have any tricks for making sure that you don't sit for hours and hours and hours on end? Because mine is, I will get a really big glass of something. Some days, or some days I'll go like to Sonic and get big drink, and then I keep refilling that with water, because you can't sit still for very long if you're drinking that much water.
Yep.
Any of you guys have acts like that?
My watch reminds me periodically to be active,
Uh-huh.
and I saw an article recently saying, it's obviously bad to sit for 8 hours a day. I saw an article saying that if you do just intense exercise for, a couple, 3 minutes every hour, that really negates a lot of the damage. And so I run up and down a flight of stairs 3 times once an hour.
Or if you guys have
when I'm being good.
Tabata, you can get Tabata timers on your phone, and get the specific exercise on YouTube. They're not fun because they're intense, but they only take 5 minutes, 3 minutes, to kind of get your blood flowing again.
I remember when I was a kid and I was a big reader. I was reading all the time, and I could read a whole novel in one sitting, and it would literally be one sitting. I sit down and 4.5 hours later I get up, and as I've aged, I can't do that anymore. I can't read like that. I'll start getting aches and pains no matter what position I get. So it seems to me that I've been on a lifetime search for the perfect office chair, perfect pen, the perfect paper to write on, all for comfort reasons like that. But I haven't found it. And so I think I'm with John. I have to get up and do stuff. I do exercise. I'm a runner and a biker and swim, all that, but I have to do it while I'm writing too. I just can't. I remember I had a day once when I was like 28. I cleared 10,000 words in that day. And I don't think I got up from my desk the whole time. I wrote 10,000 words in one sitting. I think you have to call an ambulance for me. I need a good stretch is where I'll lose maybe an hour and a half or something. And I look at my watch and go, oh, wow, I've been writing for 90 minutes straight. But that's pretty rare. I need to get up and stretch and move around. Yoga is a good idea, just good stretching exercises. Also, it gets you out of your head a little bit. Just get up, walk around the block, and come back to whatever the project is. Although I'll probably get more good thinking if I get up and go take a shower than if I walk around the block. Something about running water seems to clear the mental clogs better.
Yeah, lately I have a hard time focusing for more than an hour or two. My brain wakes me up and says, I wonder what the hell's going on in Washington today.
Nothing good.
No.
It's not worth looking.
It's a Tone says in the chat, the panel is now ways we're getting old. And as glib as it is, writing will also age your body. You know, it is important to understand that there is no job that you could do that I'm aware of that isn't going to cause wear and tear on your body, even one that's people think of as not very rigorous, physically rigorous, like writing. So we've kind of already started talking a little bit about intangibles, but let's go through our list of intangibles and let's start from the other and virtual end of the panel here and start with Betsy.
Probably my biggest is really reading. And you can see books behind me, which is a little bit of my collection. And I actually read online now more on electronic ebooks than I do paper books. But there are many times when I just turn around and grab, and just to get words, like I get stuck and I will literally grab a random book and just it's like, oh, see, I don't know what it does. It's like a mental trick. Like I don't know if it just is, see, someone else did it, you can do it too. I don't know. But a couple of books I've been using a lot lately. So again, I'm not sure if this is tangible or intangible, but I guess I think of it as intangible. Is Elizabeth, I'll hold it up for you guys. So Elizabeth George's, I'm really dark today because I don't know what's going to light coming in. I'll hold it up close to the camera.
Mastering the Process?
Yeah, it's her new book on writing, and she's a mystery writer, but she has a lot of things that really apply to any novel writing. And I would say her character workups is probably the best I've ever seen. I've never been really used character workups until I started using her process, and it's really helped my thought process. And then
you said character workups?
Well, I'm calling it that, but just like just like I don't know what I can't remember what she calls it, but just that list of about your character, personality, and icon and stuff. But this is a lot more cerebral and psychological because she writes these mysteries that really focus on the personalities of the characters, and so I just found it invaluable to really dig in. And I typically don't do that before I start writing. I get into writing my story, and then I realize I don't know that much about these people. I'm going to see what I can find out. And I'll do that, either pen and paper or typing, just depends on what my mood is. And then the other book that I've been using a lot lately, which I think is an old one, but is the Emotion Thesaurus. And I only use it when drafting. And the way that I use it is just to keep me going. So sometimes I'm like, oh, I need a reaction here. I need to know what you're feeling. And you know how you just sort of draw a blank? And I tend to draft really mean anyway. So it's almost like a place filler for me to throw in a little, heart palpitation or whatever it is, whatever the character should be experiencing, to remind me later that there should be something happening, to this character. So that's kind of like two things I've been using lately a lot, just to kind of keep my head going. Other things, I also took a class on specifically for writers, which is basically focusing and keeping writing. And because I'm a mom and I live with my two now pretty much adult kids and my husband, and it's been COVID and everything, it's been really hard to focus. And so one thing she talked about was, really just giving yourself 3 things to do that day. And one of them probably should be writing. And again, like back to my Filofax, like I write that down for each day. And I know there's going to be a couple other things that I need to get done. So I'll put those down too. But that kind of action somehow seems to spur me to remind me. Also, I think the very biggest one is just putting your phone in literally another room. I seem to have less problem getting online. I do a lot of research online and stuff, and I seem to have less problem getting online when I'm really focused, when I'm really writing, but on my computer. But my phone is my weakness, so I will put it in another room, and I'll realize like it'll be within 2 hours since I've even thought about it. It really does need to be actually in the other room. So yeah, those are kind of the things I've been doing.
How about you, Jim?
Well, I have a list of things that are all on the intangibles that work for me, but I think that every writer has to find these things that work for them best, so that everybody gets to the top of their mountain differently. When I get stuck, which can happen, like I'll be writing along and it just suddenly strikes me that if I start another sentence with the word "the," I'm going to kill something. Or I see a linking verb, or I'm suddenly convinced that I only have a vocabulary of about 150 words or something. I will stop and read some poetry, or read some Ray Bradbury, or just anybody who stylistically reminds me that the horizons of my sentences can be so much bigger and that somebody else has done it. That's kind of the thing. I get the same effect sometimes when I was working on my first novel, and I get to this point where I just think, oh, this is impossible. I can't do this. I went to a Barnes and Noble and just looked around. There's 200,000 novels in there or something. Every one of them was by somebody who completed it, and so that helped a lot. I also will sometimes read sort of not how-to books, but motivational writing books. Like I almost always feel uplifted if I read any part of Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. It's just, she's funny and she makes writing very human from her point of view. I'll read Stephen King's On Writing. Not so much the craft sections, but just the autobiography sections, because, just to remind myself that people can get to what I'm trying to do. Going a little bit different direction, I have found lately that although I often write with no sound at all, and I have the house to myself, I've been really enjoying lately writing to YouTube ambient noise videos. So, what am I writing? What works for this? So, old library with a thunderstorm outside for 3 hours. Just turn that on and it's just rolling in the background, or being on a ship, or being on a beach next to a campfire, or in a cabin in a windstorm or something. And it just washes over and it's not distracting, and I can get lost in it. My wife sometimes will be in the room. I often write in the living room. I have a nice recliner, and she'll be there grading papers. She teaches first grade, and I'll write for an hour, and then she says, "That was nice." And I go, "What was?" "Well, whatever you were playing on your computer." It was some ambient noise thing. Something else that really helps me too, which I think is an intangible, and I have to rediscover it every time. And I've been doing this for a long time, and yet I forget that it's a technique that works. And that is almost every scene I'm writing will be better if, once I get into it, I close my eyes to do the typing, close my eyes, and then just try to write the story and not see the words. And that works really well for me. And then on top of that, to go back and take a section that I recently wrote and then read it out loud. And I know you do this. I do this when I'm doing final edits. I read the whole manuscript out loud because I catch things, but it's also helpful in the composing process. Stop, read that paragraph I wrote out loud. And then I sometimes can hear the gaps. I can hear rhythmic missteps. I can hear, a lot of times it's something missing Like I have a tendency to write a little short.
Mhm.
So I'll finish a paragraph, and when I read it out loud, I go, oh, I haven't done this in it, or I ought to do this. Or wouldn't it be cool if I was doing this piece for a reading, if I could say this? And that a lot of times thinking about how something would go over at a reading helps me when I'm composing, because a reading is a dramatic process if it's well done. Reading is about drama. You're the only actor on the stage, but it's a little play and you're doing it. And so I'm putting in the lines that I think need to be there. And that's why Bradbury's great, because Bradbury always had the lines that were needed to make it sound awesome out loud. And I think that's I hadn't thought about that list of intangibles until you guys started talking, and I realized, I go, oh yeah, I do all that. Those are all things that help me quite a bit.
Great. How about you, John?
I don't have much to add to that. You know, my reading list is my main intangible because I read, because I love reading. I mean, that's what got me here, and because I can look at templates and patterns that other people have created. But my reading time goes way down when I'm writing, which is one of the really sad trade-offs that I've found.
How about you, Tone?
I guess I should have included this with tangibles, but I start with ripping off somebody else's outline. So like the first book, I hit the hero's journey pretty hard as an outline, and then the second book I went with the screenwriting guide, the Save the Cat method, which is because I wanted it to be movie friendly. So those each become an index card in the stack, and I know, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are those moments going to be, those plot points, and then that's not enough to fill a novel, right? That'll be like 15 cards, and I start adding other cards for other scenes and stuff, and it starts building out from there. And then when I feel like I got enough of those, then I move it over to a loose leaf notebook where every page is a scene. It's just bullet point stuff, but it has to be loose leaf because I still need the freedom to be able to move scenes around or cut one entirely, just tear it out of there, rewrite it, stuff like that. But yeah, because I'm self-taught, I didn't like go to any particular class other than a creative writing class in high school. For me, the tools that I use are serve other people's structures where I start with. But there definitely gets to a point where you have to stop thinking about that. You know, otherwise that becomes chains. So like, oh, I need my long dark night of the soul here, or else it's not going to be good. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, unmute myself.
Yeah.
I've got a question here in the chat. Do you ever have things you read that interfere with what you're trying to write? And I figured let's all just give a short answer to that. But for me, if it's distracting from my writing, it's usually a sign that it's something that I probably shouldn't be bothering to read. Usually because it's just, I'm very structural when it comes to plots and things. And when people's structure is kind of all over the place, I actually, I think I get the opposite. There are things that I'm writing that make it hard to read. So when I'm reading, it's just like, I'd rather go plot my own book. I'm just like, how about you guys? Anything that you read that kind of interferes with what you write?
I don't think I faced that.
I tend to avoid it. You know, if I'm working on a time travel story, I don't want to be reading time travel works, you know, so I read something opposite what I'm working on.
I think that's a good idea. A real mistake for me to read something similar to what I'm writing, because first off, I'm afraid I'll discover I'm unconsciously plagiarizing in some way or another, or it's going to feel like plagiarism. But I don't want to be distracted by their choices, their narrative choices.
Betsy?
I tend to read things that aren't speculative fiction, particularly when I'm writing. I read a lot of mysteries, and I don't write mysteries. Well, I did just write one. I haven't sold it yet. But yeah, so I don't know how much it's hard to say how much that really interferes, but I read all the time. I just read all the time. So I mean, I definitely will go through a period where a week or whatever, where I'm busy and I don't read, but typically I read just a lot anyway. So yeah, it's my downtime. I don't know that I can, I don't know that I can get through. I don't know that I can get through this winter without reading books. So.
Well, and how many of you are in critique groups or critique other writers? I would put that in intangibles because it's the process of analyzing writing that you're not so emotionally close to. I find incredibly helpful. Any of the rest of you found that?
I've done a lot of that, but not currently. But I agree, it's a huge, huge help to see the difference between what you meant to put on the page and what other people see on the page.
Also, I think it's sometimes easier to recognize your own flaws when it's not you. When it's like, oh, this person does, oh. This
Yeah,
is why I shouldn't be doing that. Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. I think I get more out of critiquing other people's things than I do people critiquing mine. But I haven't had the time to do all that for quite a while. So once you're on deadlines, it's pretty hard. I mean, I did have my last book beta read. I'll probably, try and do that again with this one, but it's pretty tough to do that weekly or bi-weekly kind of thing.
Yeah, I've got a critique group, and then I've also got a beta reading circle. And I have a strange talent, I think, just for running writers groups. So that's why I have the two. I kind of tend to do all of the managing the list and the schedule and stuff like that. But yeah, the other intangible that I would swear by is taking breaks and then rereading. So write something, then take an emotional break from it. Write it, proof it, take an emotional break, and then go back and proof it again. My kids and I during the pandemic have been writing a bunch of little children's books, and so we keep a fairly tight schedule of writing them, but we then have a pretty regimented longer schedule in proofing them. So we'll finish it 1 week, and then I'll format it and lay it out, and then when the proof comes, then we've already written another short story. I've worked substantially on another novel, and then we can kind of sit and read it, reading it multiple ways, like get grandma to read it aloud. Typos, I am convinced, are a living organism. You can get your thing perfectly proofed, but they start appearing again if you leave it. And so, if we take that week break and then read it aloud, a tangible that I forgot to mention, I don't know if any of the rest of you use these, things like Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid.
Yeah.
So I prefer Pro Writing Aid. Here's my pitch, though. I would argue that you're not really ready to be relying on it until you know enough to know how to argue with it. Know enough that when it says the grammar says this, you can be like, actually, no. You need to know the grammar rules better than a computer.
Yeah, even going back to Microsoft Word, when it was correcting your grammar, it'd be something like, no, that's clearly not right.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be able,
Microsoft Word.
You need to understand what the software is telling you. It's like, oh, it thinks that that's two independent clauses, and when it's right, then it isn't just that, oh, it tells me I need to do this. It's understanding what the rules are.
Years ago, when I almost have an English degree in addition to my other degree, and years ago when I started writing again, I lived near a university, and I actually went to the university and took a writing grammar class just to get it all back in my head, and that was stupidly valuable, just to put names on it all again. It had been a long time since I really had to analyze that, I'm one of those weirdos that really like diagramming sentences. So I hadn't exactly forgotten, but it needed to be refreshed. It needed to be brought back up to my mind. So.
And this is also where learning another language can come in handy. I mean, I don't know any other language well enough to actually do practical things like speak it or read it, but you have to understand grammar if you're going to understand someone else's grammar, or a different system's grammar. Books I swear by, if you guys read Eats, Shoots, and Leaves.
Yeah.
Still a classic. And what cracks me up about it is so good. It is about punctuation, and yet she did everything that you need to do to write a great novel. She wrote about what scared her, which is bad punctuation. And she is so passionate about it. She makes it so incredibly entertaining. Yeah. Okay. Feel free to be typing in the chat if you've got more questions for us. I think probably all of us can spend some time here listing all of the books about writing that we loved or find useful or had some kind of experience with that we want to share. So why don't we start from the middle? Why don't we start from John this time? What are some books about writing that you liked or have used?
Well, I was not prepared for that question,
Oh,
and
sorry.
Yeah, I'm
haven't been
racing over to
reading
my
those
Goodreads
books.
list right now to see what I read on the subject.
Well, I could start and feel free to just jump in.
Yeah, give us some time. We're looking it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then we've got a question about, okay, I've got a couple questions we'll answer. First, we're going to talk about the other books, but then I do see the questions in the chat. On Writing by Stephen King is brought up. Zen and the Art of Writing by Murray Bradbury. Story by McKee, Robert McKee.
Right.
Writing in general and short story in particular by Russ Hills. I still struggle with short stories. Wonder Book by Jeff Vandermeer.
Oh, that's a great book.
Mhm.
Yeah, really, really good. Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, I believe her name is. Bird by Anne Lamott. Somebody had brought up and somebody just typed into the chat. What else have you guys got? I never realized how many of these I read until I started doing panels like this, and I realized as other people start listening, it's like, oh yeah, oh and clearly I've read a lot of these.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I think it's important to find writing books that actually resonate and fit
Yes.
with you. I think sometimes people read them like it's a textbook that you have to write, read for a class. And I have a whole shelf, one of those whole shelves back there is writing books, and I've read a lot of them. But I also have realized that sometimes it's just not resonating, and that doesn't. And granted, maybe I know more than someone who's starting out about what would resonate with me, but I think you have to kind of pay attention to that. I'll mention Right Away, which is also by Elizabeth George, the same author of the book I just read. Actually, funny enough, I like her writing books better than I like her novels. I like her novels okay, but I really do like her writing books. And so something about her process and the way she thinks about writing obviously resonates with me. And I can sit here for a while and analyze that. I kind of know why. But there's been other ones that just didn't. The screenwriting one, it's really Robert McKee's.
Yeah, Story.
Story. And that one did not resonate with me. I did read the whole thing. There's something about it didn't click. But I do follow that on Twitter, so I do get little tidbits. So for some reason, it actually is nice reminders on Twitter of, oh yeah, I should be thinking about this. But taken as a whole, that one didn't particularly resonate. I would recommend it though, because I think it does happen to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, there's more than one way to skin the proverbial cat. Somebody put in the chat how not to write a novel, 200 classic mistakes and how to avoid them. Somebody else put the Stephen King on writing in there.
Yeah, the cat is really pragmatic.
If I read that book.
I'm going to pick 3 off my list here that people probably haven't heard too much of. The Writer's Guide to Character Traits. So that one was actually by a psychiatrist who said, like, if this is your job, these are kind of the personality traits that tend to dominate in that field. But then it also broke down into like criminal activities, which was very useful. Writing Science Fiction and Fantasy by Crawford Killian, because that one sort of breaks down fantasy and science fiction genre into subgenres, which I found really interesting. And probably for me, the Reader's Manifesto, An Attack on the Growing Pretentiousness in American Literary Prose, really helped me get out of that sort of like less pretentious, well, it's right there in the title, but less uptight about what I was writing and less about the long cigarette holder and the beret and the turtleneck and just sort of like writing stuff people want to read.
Somebody mentioned that they have a program called Y Writer to organize the material, and then
yeah, that's like an open source competitor with
Scrivener.
Scrivener, yeah, I've looked at it. I just ended up with Scrivener. For me, it's like about documentation. If I have a question about Scrivener, I can Google an answer.
Yeah, if you want to write by Brenda Euland. So I mean, we could. Yeah.
One other little Scrivener thing I just noticed is that you can stream Scrivener straight into Discord.
Oh, nice.
So you can have your own Discord server and let people watch you type. Some people are into
Oh,
that.
right.
It's
Right.
weird, but I've seen that on Twitch even. People just writing.
Mhm.
I've tried it myself. I think maybe if I commit to an hour of streaming, then I'm more likely to finish up that hour.
I could see doing a sprint, but I have a hard time reading when I have a hard time writing when I know I'm watching myself write sometimes. So I don't know if other people would help. So a real quick question. Somebody asked if I illustrate the children's books. I buy the stock art and Photoshop and photo manipulate. So I don't have any formal training. I used to volunteer for a graphic designer who used to do book covers and magazine covers. And so most of whatever formal training I have is from that. What does collaborating with editors, proofreaders, et cetera, look like? Let me just lay a little bit of groundwork and I'll throw it out to the rest of the panel. It's going to depend a little bit on what your publishing situation is. Independent authors, everybody works for the author. Not necessarily the case in a traditional publishing situation. So, you know, the pro and the con to independent publishing is that you are in control. That is usually more of a curse than a blessing. Because you really do need to find people who are going to tell you stuff you don't want to hear. And you need to be willing to pay them good money to do it. If you are an independent author, a fair amount of your collaboration means finding the right people. And it's just having enough self-awareness to find the people who know your weaknesses and aren't afraid to tell you about them. How about the rest of you guys? You're collaborating with editors, proofreaders, et cetera. What does that look like for you guys?
I can probably do the opposite since I'm all traditional. The opposite rundown. I have an agent and we sell that editors at houses. So my agent is not particularly. Some agents are more editorial than others. Mine that doesn't happen to be. That's fine. She does read things I write. She'll read partial things I write whenever I want her to look at something. But she's kind of a cheerleader, but that's okay because that's what you need. You know, you do need that at some point. And then I have old friends that I will have read things for beta reading. And then the editorial process will be, you know, they get the book turned in hopefully on time, which I've been fortunate enough to do that. And then they will sit on it for a while until they're ready to look at it typically. And you almost forget about it. And then we usually would have, I get a letter, depending on, it just depends on how much to do, and a phone call. Then we'd have a phone call and check, you know, just kind of chat through things. There's a lot of emailing and stuff that will go back and forth during that time. And you really have to turn around the book generally pretty fast. I think the longest I've ever had was like about 2 weeks on my longest book. So that's pretty much, you know, head down. You're really intensively working on final fixes, and it can be pretty developmental. It can be a lot too, but I've found it to be a really super positive experience each time. So I trust my editors, so I've been really happy. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. And then you have copy edits, which we don't like to talk about copy edits because they're terrible. That's when I hate being a writer. It's like the only period in time that I hate being a writer is once you've read that book like 35 times and you have to go through and find all, you know, check copy edits. That sucks. But some people feel differently. Crazy people feel differently.
Yeah,
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
I think working with a good editor is a little bit like having a good critique group. You know, except it carries a little bit more weight. I mean, no one's typically forcing you to make changes you really don't want to make.
Right.
But when you hear stuff that resonates, or you say, yeah, that really would make things stronger, you go with it.
I mean, theoretically, in a trad pub situation, you could get fired by your publisher if you are intransigent about changes, but the writer has a lot of control regardless of whether you're trad pub or indie pub situation. You are given the changes and you can always write stet when you say, no,
Right.
I don't agree with that change. And writers make jokes about like getting a rubber stamp that just says stet, 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 and they're not really being arrogant or out of touch. That's, that's not necessarily an unreasonable attitude to have about having that level of control.
So I have a split answer here. We were talking about books. I want to point out that I put a link in the chat to everybody to an article that I put together, what I thought were my favorite books on writing, including a couple that no one ever mentions. There was a book called Paragons and another one called Those Who Can that were edited by Robin Wilson. And what he did was he gathered together science fiction and fantasy stories by writers he really liked, like Harlan Ellison and Robert Silverberg and stuff. And then after each story is a lengthy commentary from the writer on how they wrote the story or what they were thinking about when they wrote the story, or, you know, all those kind of questions that you'd like to ask, and very specific to science fiction. I like those books a lot because you're looking at good fiction too. David Gerald's Worlds of Wonder, How to Write Science Fiction and Fantasy is not just a beginner's text. There's chapters on style and metric prose and memes and mastery lessons that I liked a lot. And then Robert Silverberg wrote a book called Science Fiction 101. You can't find anybody more experienced than Robert Silverberg. And he talks about stories that got him interested in science fiction and why he thinks each of those stories works. You can read that book as an anthology of really good stories, but also this collection of essays on the writing of science fiction, or an autobiography of Robert Silverberg himself. I just think they're all great. All of those with the information to get to them is in that link that I put on my, I posted it on Live Journal, which nobody uses anymore, but I'm still there.
It's you and George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, because I write short stories, my relationship with editors is a little bit different than the one with novels. What happens most of the time with short stories is I get the story back from whichever magazine has bought it with their editing comments. Almost all of them now are using just some form of a Word document marked up on the side, and then I go through and I look at what changes they suggest, and I accept the changes or I don't accept the changes. Sometimes there might be a dialogue about particular style choices where I think something sounds better than what they're suggesting, but almost always that leans my way, which is nice. And you have to do that because different magazines have different style choices. Like I find that Asimov's has a tendency to remove my instances of the word that I have put in, while Analog will put in the ones that I removed.
It's funny because they have a lot of overlapping editing. Those two.
They disagree with each other.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to go. And so because I submit to a lot of magazines and I don't really keep notes about what each magazine's preference is, you know, I submit to this magazine and I forgot that they like all of their British words spelled Britishly. So I'm going back and putting U's in words that don't have U's in them.
Yeah, and S's where there should be Z's. And
or they have a thing about the Oxford comma, or they, you know, but they're not game breakers at all or deal breakers.
Right.
They've already accepted the stories for publication. Now we're just talking about getting it into the final format. So I find that part of the work pretty easy. What is hard is every once in a while I'll get an editor that says, I like this story, but they want to make some significant plot changes to it.
Right.
And my tendency is to go, well, if I agree with it, I'll give it a shot. And if it feels like we're making progress, I'll continue. But a couple times I've had stories where the editor sent back some suggestions and I sent back a revision, and then they sent back more suggestions and I just said, screw it. We're not on the same page on this story.
Some editors are frustrated writers, and it's another piece of career advice. If you want to be a writer, do not go into editing. You will become an editor. So we're at our 5-minute mark, and so somebody put a question in the chat that I think would be a fun way to end. They want to know our favorite font and font size to type in. I will be as quick as I can because I could rant, because I do design and I run a formatting company, and so you know, I know that the kerning on this font is not uniform, and you know, like I could go on about fonts. What I actually will say though instead is that little things like fun fonts or whatever can be what makes the difference between whether you sit down and write and whether you just kind of can't get yourself into it. And you should never punish yourself for having these little whims or these little quirks or anything like that. Whatever gets you in the chair. If it's writing in papyrus, don't talk to me, but go for it.
I'm writing this one in Bookerly. I don't know why. I just am, and I don't always see really well. So my fonts are really big. Like on my computer. In fact, I'm like squinting at the chat because it's really small on my computer. And people make fun of me for it, but that makes it really comfortable for me to be able to write for long periods of time and to edit and to see. But I'll switch it over to Times New Roman when I'm really seriously editing the book. So when I get closer to where it's time to turn it in. And I think that does a couple of things. One, it does kind of make it fun. It makes it sort of aesthetically pleasing. And I do think that's important. But I think also it can give you sort of a mind switch, and also seeing the words in a different font can make you understand that, no, this is working, or yeah, actually that's great. And like sometimes I'll send snippets out to friends or whatever, and once I see it like texted on my phone or in an email, then the font again is different, and then I find myself editing it again in that different font. So I do think it really does give you, it's almost like, I don't do a lot of reading aloud. I'm not super verbal in auditory, so that doesn't really resonate with me, but seeing things does. And so I think that's almost my read aloud, is switching fonts. So yeah, I highly recommend playing with fonts.
12-point Courier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
same here.
write short stories in 12-point Courier, and I write novels in whatever. Funny
And
enough, yeah.
for those in the biz, the old-fashioned way of doing word count was doing 10-point Courier 1-inch margins.
Right.
Double spaced is 250 words per page. And so knowing tricks like that help you know how much you've got down.
Mhm.
I do 12-point Times New Roman, since that's almost always how I submit it, and I want to look at it, how it's going to be submitted. But I will, as Betsy suggested, blow up the screen sometimes, so I'm looking at my own page at 125% so that it's clearer for me and easier to read. And when I print something off to do a reading, I always print it off in like 14-point or 16-point, because I don't want to get lost in a line and not remember where I was as I'm reading. But 12-point Times New Roman works for me.
How about you, Tone?
I'm with John, 12-point Courier. I want it to look as much like a typewriter as possible.
You don't look old enough to be old-fashioned.
No,
I see it more as magical thinking.
Well, thank you guys. It was awesome to sit and talk about writing tools, and thanks everyone in the audience. It was really cool to have people posting questions and stuff like that. It was good to get that interaction. I was kind of nervous doing an online con, whether we would lose that, but it's awesome to see that people are here and they're engaged. And so thank you, everybody. And
Thank you for moderating, Emily. That was great.
well,
Hi,
thanks.
everyone.
Yeah. So
We should
See you
hang out
guys
in
later.
some of us should hang out in the Discord afterward.
yeah, go ahead and hang out on the Discord, and I'll actually be back in here for the next panel, which is at 11:30.
What room is this when we go to Discord to look at?
Neverland.
Neverland.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll be over in the Discord as well. And so if anybody has any follow-up questions or jokes or wants to mock us personally or whatever, that's where you go.
Okay.
But thank you guys.
Thank you.
See
Hi,
ya.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all. I'm going to end the session now.
Thanks.
Bye.